The old pickup truck kicked up a plume of dust, its engine a low growl that seemed to be the only sound for miles. For two friends chasing the thrill of the perfect catch, the isolation of Black Creek Reservoir was a promise. But some promises, they were about to learn, are meant to be broken, and some lonely places are best left alone.
The asphalt gave way to gravel, and the gravel gave way to a deeply rutted dirt path that was more of a suggestion than a road. The old Ford Ranger whined in protest, its shocks groaning with every bone-jarring dip and rise. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cheap cigars and the stale crackle of a classic rock station fighting a losing battle against static.
Chris, behind the wheel, took a long, satisfied drag from his cigar and grinned. "See? Told you it was out here." Michael didn't look up from his phone, his brow furrowed. "Chris, this guy's ad was on some obscure Facebook group? Black Creek Reservoir, a place that barely shows up on the map? Are you sure about this? We still have another 6 miles of this," he said, gesturing at the punishing trail ahead. "If we get there and it's a bust, we're sleeping in the truck."
Relax, man. You saw the pictures. The guy claims it's teeming with monster bass. Private reservoir, cheap fees, and even said we could camp out overnight if we wanted, Chris countered, his voice full of the easy confidence that always seemed to precede their worst decisions. Think about it. Total seclusion. We'll have the whole place to ourselves. They were avid anglers, borderline obsessed. The promise of a legendary catch was a siren song they couldn't resist. And Chris had been swayed by a single, tantalizing post. There was no lengthy discussion, no careful planning. The moment he'd seen it, he'd called Michael, and within hours, they were on the road.
An hour later, the path finally opened up, and the truck rolled to a stop. They climbed out, stretching their cramped limbs, and a heavy silence descended, broken only by the hum of insects. Before them lay the Black Creek Reservoir, a vast dark sheet of water stretching several hundred yards, hemmed in by a dense, tangled forest of cypress trees whose roots clawed at the water's edge.
Dotted along the shoreline were small, derelict structures that looked like they might have once been rental cabins. Now they were just hollow shells, their windows like vacant eyes. The owner had apparently built them for overnight fishermen, but they hadn't seen a visitor in years. Suddenly, the placid surface of the water was broken by a powerful thwomp. A fish, a big one, had just breached. Michael's skepticism evaporated. He took a deep, appreciative breath of the damp, earthy air. "Okay," he conceded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This might not be a total bust after all. But where is everybody? A place like this should be packed." "Told you, man. The guy just started advertising. We're the first to know," Chris said, practically beaming. "Look at that water. A 2-pounder easy. Let's go find the owner. He must be around here somewhere."
They spotted him near a small, slightly less dilapidated cabin set back from the others. An older man, slumped in a folding chair, a fishing rod propped beside him. He seemed to be asleep, oblivious to their approach.
Michael cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir," he began softly. "We saw an ad online. Is this the place for public fishing?" The man stirred. He slowly turned his head, his eyes deep set in a weathered face, scanning them from head to toe. A moment passed, then a slow, creaking smile spread across his lips as he pushed himself to his feet. "That it is. Name's Abernathy. I own the place. You boys looking to fish?"
"Yes, sir," Chris confirmed. "What are your rates?"
$20 a day for a single hook line. $50 an hour if you're using a 6-hook rig. What's your pleasure? Abernathy asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. We'll take this 6-hook, Michael said, already pulling out his wallet. Here's $200 for a deposit. We'll settle up when we leave. Abernathy's eyes lit up as he took the cash. Sounds good. It's about 3 in the afternoon now. You boys starting right away? He squinted at them. I'm Abernathy, by the way. Michael, and this is Chris, Michael said with a nod. He and Chris turned back toward their truck to grab their gear, leaving the old man by his cabin.
They chose a good spot on a relatively stable-looking wooden pier, set up their chairs, baited their hooks, and cast their lines. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the cypress trees, and for a while, the only sounds were the rhythmic whir of their reels and the soft plop of bait hitting the water. But the quiet was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, oppressive. The air grew colder, carrying a hint of something desolate and wild. 3 hours passed. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. They'd had bites, plenty of them, tantalizing tugs on the line that suggested something massive was circling their bait just below, but they hadn't landed a single thing.
As dusk settled in, Abernathy ambled over to them. "Any luck, boys?" Michael reeled in his line with a sigh. "Not yet. We're thinking of staying the night. Try our luck after dark."
Abernathy stared at them for a long moment, an unreadable expression on his face. It wasn't concern, not exactly. It was something else, something heavier. He finally let out a long sigh. "Well, suit yourselves. My house is a couple miles back down that way," he said, hooking a thumb towards a barely visible path. "I'm heading home for the night. Settle up with me in the morning." And with that, he turned and disappeared into the growing darkness.
Night fell completely. The woods that surrounded them became an impenetrable wall of black. Michael gathered some dry branches and kindled a small fire, its flickering light a lonely beacon in the vast, silent wilderness. The wind picked up, carrying the cold off the water, and the sense of isolation intensified. It was just the two of them.
Suddenly, a loud splash echoed from the darkness, followed by the high-pitched scream of Chris's drag. "Michael, get over here! I've got one! It's a monster!" Michael dropped the firewood and scrambled to his side. Chris was fighting the rod with everything he had, his muscles straining, the carbon fiber stick bent into a dangerous arc. "Help me, man! It's pulling me in!" This was no ordinary fish. The pull was immense, relentless. Even with both of them hauling back, the line was still screaming out of the reel, dragged by some unseen leviathan in the depths. "Hold on," Michael grunted, his knuckles white. "This thing's gotta be 100 pounds. A trophy black carp for sure. Keep the tension. I'm getting the rope."
He let go, sprinting back to the truck. He grabbed a coil of thick nylon rope from the bed, tied one end securely to the truck's trailer hitch, and looped the other around his own waist, turning himself into a human anchor. He ran back towards the pier, flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive dark. But as the light washed over the scene, he froze. The frantic struggle was over. Chris was just sitting there. He was holding the rod, yes, but it was no longer bent. He was sitting perfectly still, staring out at the black water. Michael's heart sank with disappointment. "It got away?" he called out, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. The figure didn't answer. The quiet stretched, thick and unnatural, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The silence became unnerving, then frightening.
Michael walked closer, the flashlight beam trembling slightly in his hand.
Chris, you okay? He asked, and then he saw it. Why are you soaking wet? Michael's voice dropped to a choked whisper. And where did you get those clothes? The figure before him was familiar, yet horribly wrong. It was Chris's shape, Chris's size, but the clothes, it looked like a vintage Boy Scout uniform, the kind you'd see in old black and white photos. It was drenched, clinging to his frame, and ripped in several places. The crisp khaki was stained with patches of disgusting, greenish-black algae and a slimy, foul-smelling muck.
The hands gripping the rod were the worst part. They were gaunt, the skin a pale, waxy, waterlogged white. Chris had a farmer's tan. This person didn't. This was Chris, but it wasn't.
Slowly, the figure turned its head. The movement was a thing of nightmares, a series of sharp, jerky motions accompanied by a wet, skeletal crack. The neck bent, twisted, snapped back 90 degrees with a sound like celery breaking. Michael stumbled backward, a strangled gasp catching in his throat as he fell hard onto the damp ground. It was Chris's face, but warped into a grotesque, evil parody. A wide, predatory smile stretched his lips. "Hey!" A distorted, gurgling voice slithered out, a mockery of his friends. "Come here. Help me pull in the fish." The smile, the voice, it was a cocktail of pure terror that sent a jolt of ice through Michael's veins. He scrambled backward, untying the rope from his waist with fumbling, panicked fingers, and ran. He ran for the truck, for his life.
"You idiot!" A new voice shouted from behind him, the real Chris's voice. "It's me! It's not a ghost, you moron! Stop running!" Michael skidded to a halt, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He turned, still wary, breathing heavily. How is your skin so pale? Those clothes, where did you get them? Don't lie to me. You're not him."
The figure stood up and, to Michael's astonishment, began to laugh. A genuine, hearty laugh. He stripped off the soggy, disgusting shirt. "You're kidding me, right? You got so scared?" Chris was holding his phone up. "I got the whole thing on video. Man, you should have seen your face."
The tension in Michael's body deflated all at once. He slumped to the ground, one hand on his chest, trying to slow his racing heart. The other hand scooped up a small rock, and he chucked it weakly in Chris's direction. "You son of a... I almost had a heart attack. I thought you were a drowned Boy Scout or something." Chris was still wheezing with laughter. He turned back to his fishing rod, still looking at the video on his phone, relishing his victory. Michael, still shaken, walked back over, ready to snatch the phone and delete the evidence.
But suddenly, Chris's laughter died in his throat. He froze, his face going slack. He dropped the phone as if it had burned him, his mouth opening and closing silently, a string of choked, incoherent sounds escaping. "What is it now?" Michael asked, annoyed. He bent down and picked up the phone, his curiosity piqued by the genuine look of terror on his friend's face. The screen was still lit up. The video paused.
Michael stared, and his blood ran cold. The video showed Chris grinning like an idiot in the creepy wet uniform. But he wasn't alone. Standing right beside him, where there should have been empty air, was another figure. A small, shimmering, translucent shape. The faint outline of a child, its form indistinct, its face a blur of shadow. It was standing right next to Chris, staring directly into the camera. Their eyes met, full of a shared, creeping dread. Together, they turned their gaze from the phone to the discarded Boy Scout shirt, which lay in a slimy, pathetic heap next to the campfire. Michael took a long, shaky breath. "Chris," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "where did you get that shirt?" Chris, pale and trembling, pointed a shaky finger toward the dark water. It wasn't a fish," he stammered. "The hook, it snagged on this. When you went to get the rope, I pulled it up. I thought it would be funny to scare you. I even rubbed some flour on my hands to look pale." A horrifying silence fell between them. "If it was just the shirt," Michael said slowly, the terrible logic clicking into place, "then what was pulling us towards the water? The video, you saw it too, right? There was something, standing next to you." Chris nodded, his face ashen, the earlier bravado completely gone. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. It has to be," he whispered. "It pulled with the strength of a grown man." The two of them stood frozen in the firelight, the silence of the reservoir pressing in on them. The playful prank had curdled into something monstrous and real. The air, which had once felt crisp and wild, now felt suffocating, charged with a malevolent energy. Every shadow seemed to coalesce into a lurking shape. Every gust of wind sounded like a ghostly whisper. "We're leaving," Michael said, his voice firm, cutting through the paralysis. "Now." There was no argument. They scrambled into action, their movements clumsy with fear. Rods were thrown into the truck bed without being broken down. Tackle boxes were tossed in half open, their contents rattling. The only thought was to get away from this cursed place as fast as humanly possible. But as Chris grabbed his last rod, the one still baited in the water, the line suddenly went taut, and the drag screamed again. Zzz. A powerful, desperate tug, a sign of a massive catch. For a split second, the angler's instinct warred with raw terror on Chris's face. "Michael!" he yelled, his voice a strange mix of fear and excitement. "It's another one's on! It's huge!" "Are you insane?" Michael shrieked. "It's not a fish! Drop the damn rod and let's go!" He wanted to. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to let go, but the pull was magnetic, a primal challenge he found almost impossible to ignore. The fear was paralyzing, but the allure of what lay beneath was a different kind of force. Just help me pull it in. We'll see what it is, and then we'll go," he pleaded, his knuckles white as he gripped the rod. Against his better judgment, against every survival instinct screaming inside him, Michael grabbed the rod alongside Chris. It was an act of madness born from a shared, morbid curiosity. They had to know. Together, they heaved backwards. The sound of the drag was gone, replaced by the creak and groan of the rod itself, threatening to snap. The resistance was incredible, but it was slowly giving way. Something was coming closer to the surface. "I'm shining the light on it," Michael gasped, pulling his phone out with one hand while holding the rod with the other. He aimed the beam at the spot where the line disappeared into the inky blackness. The water churned. For a heart-stopping moment, they thought they saw the silver flash of a giant fish. But then, something broke the surface. It wasn't silver. It was pale, horribly, unnaturally pale.
It was a hand, a small, slender, bone-white hand, its fingers clamped around their fishing line. A shared scream tore from their throats. They dropped the rod as if it were white-hot iron. It clattered onto the pier and was violently yanked into the reservoir, disappearing into the depths with a final, sickening plunk. They didn't wait to see more. They turned and ran, a blind, primal terror propelling them. They scrambled into the truck, slammed the doors, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the dead of night.
Chris's hands shook so violently he could barely fit the key into the ignition. His breath came in ragged sobs. "Come on, come on, come on," he chanted. He twisted the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, turned over once, and died. "What's wrong?" Michael yelled. I don't know. It won't start." Chris twisted the key again. Click, click, click. Nothing. Just the dead metallic sound of failure. A wave of utter hopelessness washed over them. Trapped. "It can't be a coincidence," Michael whispered, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "It doesn't want us to leave."
And then a voice, a child's voice, soft and filled with a terrible, lonely sorrow, seemed to rise from the lake itself. It wasn't loud, but it pierced the cab of the truck as if it were whispered directly into their ears. "It's so cool down here. Won't you come play with me?" Their heads snapped towards the windshield. There, by the flickering embers of their fire, stood a shape. It was small, translucent, its edges wavering in the night air like a heat haze. A small, indistinct silhouette of a young boy, his form flickering and translucent at the edges, often partially obscured by mist or shadow. One of its small spectral arms was raised, its hand waving at them in a slow, beckoning gesture. Its body swayed gently, as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. Michael didn't even think. His mind was a blank slate of pure animal terror. "Run!" He threw his door open and bolted. Chris was a half second behind him. They didn't grab a flashlight, they didn't grab a weapon. They just ran, plunging headlong into the darkness of the woods, following the faint outline of the path Abernathy had pointed out earlier. Behind them, the child's voice echoed, not chasing, but floating sadly on the air. "Don't go. Please, stay and play." They ran until their lungs burned and their legs felt like lead, crashing through underbrush, stumbling over unseen roots. The path was their only guide, a faint ribbon of lighter earth in the oppressive blackness. After what felt like an eternity, the frantic pace slowed to a staggered, breathless walk.
Michael fumbled for his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. He turned on the flashlight, the weak beam cutting a pathetic circle in the gloom. He swept it around them. Trees. Gnarled, ancient trees closing in on all sides. The ground beneath their feet was a carpet of dead leaves and twigs. The path was gone. "Oh no," Michael breathed. "We're lost." Chris looked down, then around, his face a mask of despair. "He said the house was just a couple of miles. How did we lose the path?" "We panicked. We just ran," Michael snapped, his own fear turning to anger. "Now what do we do? Go back? Go back? Are you insane? It's back there. Whatever it takes, I'm not going back there." Michael knew he was right. $10 million wouldn't be enough to drag him back to that lake, but he didn't have to agree. Chris had already made the decision, turning his back on the direction they'd come from and pushing forward into the uncharted woods. "I don't care if I have to walk all night. I'm getting out of here." With a sigh of resignation, Michael followed. They walked in silence, staying close, every snap of a twig sending a fresh jolt of adrenaline through their exhausted bodies. The woods were unnervingly quiet. After a few minutes, Chris, who was leading, suddenly stopped and whipped around. "Knock it off, man," he hissed, his voice trembling with irritation. Michael looked at him, confused. "Knock what off?" "Tapping me on the shoulder. It's not funny. I'm already freaked out enough." Michael's blood ran cold.
Chris. "I'm 5 feet behind you. I didn't touch you." A dreadful silence hung in the air between them. Chris stared at him, his eyes wide in the gloom. Just as he was about to speak, a sound drifted through the trees. It was faint, a dry, rasping, rustling sound. Shh. And then the voice again, closer this time, seeming to come from all directions at once. "Don't go. I'm so lonely. Stay and play. Run!" It was a simultaneous, unspoken decision. They crashed through the forest, all sense of direction gone, driven only by the need to escape the horrible, disembodied voice. They were no longer men. They were prey. They ran and ran until a glimmer of hope appeared through the trees. A light, a single, steady, artificial light. "Chris, look!" Michael yelled, pointing with a shaking hand. "A house! We're saved! Hurry!" The light was a beacon in the suffocating darkness. It was their salvation. With their last reserves of strength, they sprinted towards it, bursting out of the tree line and stumbling into a small clearing. There, sitting at the edge of the woods, was a modest, single-story house with a single light glowing on the porch.
They half ran, half stumbled to the door, pounding on the wood with a desperate rhythm. "Mr. Abernathy, help us! Please, open the door!" Michael yelled, his voice raw. After a moment that stretched for an eternity, the inside light flickered on, followed by the sound of shuffling feet. "Who in the hell is making such a racket?" Abernathy's angry voice grumbled from behind the door. "Don't you know what time it is? It's us, the fishermen, from the lake! Please, you have to let us in!" The door creaked open, and Abernathy stood there, his face a mask of sleepy irritation. But when he saw their faces, pale, streaked with dirt, their eyes wide with terror, his anger dissolved into confusion. "What in God's name happened to you two?" He ushered them inside. "Get in! Get in!" The warmth of the house was a sanctuary. The door closing behind them felt like a seal being placed on a tomb, locking the horrors of the night outside. Michael collapsed into a worn armchair, his body trembling uncontrollably.
Abernathy went to the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of steaming coffee. "I'm sorry, sir," Michael stammered, taking the mug with trembling hands. "We didn't want to bother you, but at the lake we saw a ghost. It chased us." "That's right," Chris added, his voice thin. "It tried to kill us. Sir, do you know, has anyone ever died in that lake?" Abernathy's face hardened. "Nonsense. I've lived here for 50 years. There's no such thing as ghosts." But his denial lacked conviction. He looked from Chris's terrified face to his mud-caked, sopping clothes. "Son, what happened to you? You smell like the bottom of the lake." Chris looked down at himself, a shudder running through him. The foul, stagnant smell of the deep water clung to him. The shirt I found, and I fell. Can I please use your shower? I need to get this off me." "Bathroom's down the hall to the back. You go clean up. I'll find you some dry clothes."
Chris practically ran to the bathroom, Michael trailing nervously behind him. "I'll wait out here," Michael said. "I'm not letting you out of my sight." The bathroom was old-fashioned, with a heavy cast-iron tub. Chris didn't bother with the shower. He plugged the drain, turned the taps on full blast, and sank into the hot water, letting the heat soak into his chilled bones. He leaned his head back, closing his eyes, trying to erase the images from his mind. For a moment, with Michael just outside the door, he felt almost safe. He didn't notice, at first, when the water lapping at his skin began to change. He didn't see the black, oily tendrils of green-black muck beginning to curl up from the drain, bleeding into the clear water, turning it the color of a stagnant pond. The foul stench of decay filled the small room, and he wrinkled his nose. "Damn, this guy's pipes must be ancient," he muttered. He reached for the shampoo bottle, and that's when the hand shot out of the drain. It was small, pale, and inhumanly strong. It clamped around his ankle like a vice of ice. Before Chris could even scream, he was yanked violently underwater. The murky water filled his mouth and nose. He thrashed, kicking, fighting, but it was like struggling against a force of nature. He managed to break the surface for a single gasping breath before he was pulled under again. His lungs burned. The child's voice echoed in his head, not through the air, but inside his own mind. "Now, you'll play with me, forever." Panic gave way to a primal, desperate instinct. His thrashing hand found the shampoo bottle. He slammed it against the side of the tub again and again, creating a frantic, drumming rhythm, a desperate SOS. Outside, Michael heard the frantic drumming and his heart stopped. "Chris, are you okay? Chris!" He rattled the locked doorknob. "Answer me, damn it!" When only the sound of splashing and muffled choking came from within, he started kicking the door. "I'm coming in!" Abernathy came running. "What are you doing to my house?" "He's in trouble! Your key! Get the key!" Michael screamed, throwing his shoulder against the wood. The lock splintered. They burst into the steamy, foul-smelling room. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. The tub was filled with black water. Chris was face down in it, unnervingly still. Michael dragged him out onto the floor. "He's not breathing." He began frantic chest compressions, tilting Chris's head back, forcing air into his lungs. "Come on, Chris, breathe. Don't you dare give up on me." For a terrifying minute, there was nothing. Then Chris's body convulsed. He coughed violently, spewing a torrent of foul, black water onto the floor. Michael held him, shaking, as Chris gasped for air. A few hours later, around 2 a.m., a pale and trembling Chris was lying on a sofa, wrapped in blankets. He finally had the strength to speak, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It wanted to kill me, Michael. It was in the house. We have to leave." "Calm down," Michael soothed. "It's not even morning yet. We can't go back out there." Abernathy, who had been sitting silently in a corner, stood up, his face grim. "You boys stay here. Don't go anywhere," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I'm going to the lake to see what's what." "No, sir, you can't. It's dangerous," Michael protested. But Abernathy was already grabbing a heavy coat and a powerful flashlight. He walked out the door, and they heard the distinct, chilling sound of a key turning in the lock from the outside. He had locked them in. Exhausted beyond measure, trapped and terrified, they could do nothing but wait. Eventually, despite their fear, a deep, heavy sleep claimed them both. But it was not a restful sleep. It was a nightmare. They found themselves back in the truck by the lake, the engine dead. The child ghost was outside, waving. The terror was fresh, the escape just as desperate. They ran through the woods, felt the phantom touch, heard the disembodied voice. They pounded on the door of Abernathy's house. And then Michael woke up with a gasp, his heart pounding. He was back on the armchair. Chris was stirring on the sofa. "I just had the weirdest dream," Michael began. "That we were back at the lake?" Chris finished, his voice trembling. "Me too. It felt real." Michael looked around the room, and a new creeping dread settled in his stomach. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He ran his hand along the arm of the chair. It came away coated in a thick layer of gray dust.
Chris, look, he whispered. The house was no longer clean. A blanket of dust covered every surface. Cobwebs hung in thick shrouds from the corners of the ceiling. The air was stale and musty, the smell of a place that had been abandoned for decades.
"This is a nightmare," Chris said, his voice cracking. "This has to be a dream." He scrambled to the door and twisted the knob. It was still locked solid. "That son of a bitch locked us in a haunted house!" He started looking around frantically. "Help me find something to break the door down!" They searched the derelict house. In the corner of one room, under a dusty canvas sheet, was an old wooden chest. Chris pried the lid open. Inside, nestled amongst moth-eaten clothes, he found a small, leather-bound photo album and a folded piece of paper. He opened the album. There was only one photograph inside. It was old, black and white, and curled at the edges. It showed two young boys, no older than 12, standing proudly next to a brand-new bicycle. One of the boys was unmistakably a young Abernathy. "Look at this," he said, handing it to Michael. Michael took it, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over him. He turned the photo over. Scrawled on the back in faded ink were the words, "Liam and Nathan Abernathy, May 15th, 1979. Happy birthday, Liam." "Liam," Michael breathed. "That must be him, the ghost." He unfolded the other paper. It was a hand-drawn map of the reservoir area, with a crude X marking a spot deep in the woods. This must be what it wants us to find.
Just then, they heard the sound of a key in the lock. The front door creaked open, and Abernathy, Nathan, stepped inside. They didn't hesitate. They walked right up to him. "We know," Michael said, his voice cold and steady. He held up the photograph. "We know about Liam." The old man's face, already grim, seemed to collapse. He aged 20 years in an instant. "You don't understand," he rasped. "Then make us understand," Chris demanded, his fear replaced by a righteous anger. "What happened to him?" "It was an accident," Abernathy cried, tears welling in his eyes. He sank into a chair, his body shaking with the sobs of a 50-year-old secret. "I never wanted. I was just a boy." And the story poured out of him. Liam was an orphan who lived nearby. They were best friends. For Liam's birthday, Nathan had stolen money from his father to buy him that bicycle. But his parents, cruel and vindictive people, found out. Furious, they dragged Liam to their property, not to beat him, but to inflict a different kind of cruelty. "They locked him in the old root cellar," Abernathy choked out, his voice thick with shame. "To teach him a lesson. It was cold, dark. They told me if I tried to let him out, they'd lock me in there with him. I was so scared. I just stood there and listened to him cry." In the middle of the night, Liam had tried to escape. He'd climbed some old shelving in the pitch-black cellar, but it gave way. He fell. When Nathan's parents opened the door in the morning, they found him still and silent at the bottom of the stairs. Realizing their cruel punishment had led to his death, their only thought was to cover it up. "They made me help," Abernathy whispered. "They said we were all in it together. They put his body in a weighted sack and threw him in the reservoir, off the big rock on the east side. The next day, they told everyone he'd run away. Years later, guilt-ridden and terrified of the bicycle that had caused it all, he took it deep into the woods, to the spot marked on the map, and buried it, hoping to bury the memory with it. He doesn't want revenge," Michael said softly, understanding dawning. "He wants to be found. He wants you to tell the truth.
So, in the gray light of dawn, the three of them went back to the lake. The air was still, the water calm. Tying a rope around Abernathy's waist, they watched as the old man took a deep breath and plunged into the cold, dark water, returning to the scene of a childhood trauma. Minutes later, the rope tugged violently. They hauled him in. He was dragging a heavy, rotting canvas sack. He laid it gently on the shore, the weight of its tragic contents settling with a heavy finality. He didn't need to open it. They didn't need to see. They all knew. "It's him," Abernathy wept. "It's Liam." They buried Liam on a hill overlooking the reservoir, under a tall pine tree. Abernathy fashioned a small wooden cross. As they finished, they felt a change in the air.
A figure appeared by the grave. It was Liam, but he was no longer a terrifying spectral thing. He was just a boy, solid and whole, smiling a sad, grateful smile. He gave them a small wave and then faded away into the warm light of the rising sun. Back at the truck, which now started on the first try, Abernathy pressed a thick wad of cash into Michael's hand. "This is for you, and for everything." Michael pushed half of it back. "This is for a proper headstone." As they drove away, leaving the reservoir behind them for good, a soft voice, like a whisper on the wind, brushed past their ears one last time. "Thank you."